Now I have a Cisco access point connected to my system still, and I now want to access it using a web browser and perform some configuration. The web browser that I'll use is Internet Explorer. It's easy enough to open the browser. And now the browser window is open here on my screen. So now I'll enter the access point's IP address, the one we configured in the previous lab. In this case, it's http://172.16.0.100. Now that we've entered that, we'll press enter. And since a Cisco access point requires authentication, the next thing I see is the Enter Network Password dialog. I need to provide the username and password here. Now at this point, I'm going to be using the default user, the user that was built in at the factory. These default settings of an AeroNet 1200 series access point include the username Cisco with a capital C and a default password of Cisco with a capital C. Remember that both the username and the password are case sensitive. After I've entered these, I click the OK button. Assuming I've entered the correct credentials, the next page that opens is the Home Summary Status page. Now you want to check out this page. It has some navigation links and configuration action buttons as well. We also see a general overview of our 1200 series access point. I want to create a new user. So I'm going to click Security on the left side menu of the home page. This will open the security page. Now let's check out the built-in users. See that there's only one default user, and that's the user Cisco, which has read-only rights. Remember, I used the credentials of this user account to access the access point. But what about administrative access? Let's click Admin Access under the Security menu. This displays the Admin Access page. Now scroll down from the top and analyze the existing state of Admin Access. It says that the administrator is authenticated by default authentication global password. The next item is the default authentication password field, and finally, the local user list. Observe that the local user list, individual passwords, has only one user. In example, the default user, Cisco. I'm now going to create another user, give read-write access to the user, and set a password for individual authentication. So I'll type in a username of administrator and then assign the password as the word password. Now I'll change the capability settings to read-write by selecting the corresponding radio button. And finally, I'll apply the settings by clicking the Apply button. When I do this, I receive a warning notification message. Notice that the message says the settings you've configured will be updated. I simply click OK to proceed. Now check out the user list again. Is the new user administrator in the list? Well, it is. Will I now be able to use the newly created username and password to log into the access point? The answer is no, not now. Why? Well, the default administrator authentication, which is default configuration global password, will force this user to use the global password, which is Cisco in our case. To enable the user to log in with its own password, I need to select local user list only individual passwords and then click Apply. When I do this, a notification message immediately pops up with a warning that this modification will delete the default password. I click OK, and another warning message pops up saying that changing HTTP authentication will require re-authentication. Then I click OK again. We see that this takes us right back to the Enter Network Password screen for re-authentication. So, can I now log in using the user administrator, which uses the individual password? Let's try it. Type administrator as the username and password as the password. And then we'll click OK to see if it works. Excellent, it worked. I'm now re-authenticated by the newly created user administrator and returned back to the admin access page. Next, I'm going to verify that the admin authentication has changed to local user list only individual passwords. Finally, I click Security from the menu. This action takes me back to the same page in which I was working earlier. Check out the new user administrator. Here we see we've added a new user with read-write capabilities.